Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we'll be talking about the Revoice movement and its executive director, Bekah Mason. So, why are we talking about the Revoice movement? The Revoice movement is the next major fight on the horizon, my opinion on that. But we see it in other denominations, the denominations that went woke then embraced Revoice. That's usually the pattern of events. Now, the PCA was a little bit different where they rejected the Revoice conference, which primarily targeted them first. And now they got to battle with the wokeness, and that's going to be key. And we'll talk about that in a later video. But many of the Revoice people are Southern Baptists. Southern Baptists. And it was a big deal when Karen Swallow Prior endorsed the Revoice conference. I believe this was in 2019. But clearly, I think the groundwork has been laid for the Revoice conference, a movement to promote homosexuality in the church, to mainstream it, to normalize it, is going to make a resurgence, at very least in the Southern Baptist Convention, because it's already, it is already claimed other denominations. And the PCA forestalled this event. They defeated it. And that's why I covered that back at the beginning of July. So the Evangelical Covenant Church is one example of a denomination that totally embraced Revoice Conference. And they're an extremely woke denomination. It really started with egalitarianism. I did an entire video on why I think they're an apostate denomination. So, we're going to talk about Bekah Mason. So, who is Bekah Mason? She is a graduate of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, who gave her an MDiv, and Al Mohler's Southern Baptist Theological Seminary gave her a THM. So, these seminaries would go on to become more woke after giving her degrees, and they have not rescinded these degrees. Now, I don't know if seminaries can rescind degrees on the account of heresy or apostasy or anything like that, or even bad conduct like plagiarism, Ed Litton. I'm talking about you. She was educated in the Southern Baptist entity and does not affirm biblical sexuality. And I don't think she ever has affirmed biblical sexuality. That's a thing. She has blog posts dating back to at least around 2012, 2010 era of undermining biblical sexuality, especially with regards to the issue of homosexuality. But even more astonishing, she has primarily worked, before she worked at Revoice, she primarily worked in Christian education, as in she was educating students, your children. If you send your children to a private Christian school, she was hired at private Christian schools in the Chattanooga area. And that's pretty disgraceful that those schools did not do a proper vetting process on these issues. So, furthermore, she is a co-host on the Life on Side B podcast. That is a pro-homosexuality in the church podcast created and founded by Josh Proctor. It is also co-hosted by Grant Hartley, another Revoice fellow, and I've done an entire article on him and his antinomianism. So, Bekah Mason is also a founding member of the Pelican Project. What's the Pelican Project? My opinion, it looks like a woke feminist club, and it contains Karen Swallow Prior, who endorsed Revoice, as I mentioned earlier, Christy Anya Bwile, Rachel Gilson, Tish Harrison Warren, another Revoice speaker or member, and more. The advisory council of this woke feminist club includes Russell Moore. Is that a shock or what? Male feminist. Christina Edmondson, who I've done a video on, and she was the one talking about the rebuttals to Black Lives Matter. I did 2 videos on that, I believe. That was her in those videos. Esau McCulley, your woke preacher. Thabiti Anya Bwile. Andy Couch, another Revoice. And among others, I didn't do an exhaustive list of the names here. Now, Bekah Mason is literally, and I mean literally, a blue-haired lesbian feminist. And I'm not joking about that. She literally has blue in her hair in the video I'm about to show you. And we can't let blue-haired lesbian feminists run the church. That's really stupid. Don't let this blue-haired feminist Jezebel run the church. So I'm going to play a woke preacher clip. I know I'm not woke preacher clip, but Evangelical Dark Web has some woke preacher clips for you. This is Bekah Mason right now.
For those of us who are committed to celibacy, don't our very lives stand as a monument to the fact that His love is better than life? Can't we show that He is better than sex, better than erotic intimacy? Are we not living, breathing reminders to the church and to the world at large that marriage can be placed as an idol, and it will ultimately not fulfill our longings to know and be known? Do we not have things to teach the rest of the church about carrying burdens, about sacrifice, about faithfulness, service, community, perseverance? For those of us who are in mixed orientation marriages, do we not show a watching world that marriage is not about self-fulfillment or about being in love with the one, but about being faithful to a covenant made with God to love another human for our good and for His glory? Do we not demonstrate on a whole other level the otherness of God loving humanity, the mystery of Christ and the church that Paul writes about in Ephesians? Instead of white-knuckling our way through life, holding on to the promise of heaven to keep us faithful to Him, what if we opened our hands, shared our burdens with one another, walked alongside one another? This is the experience many of us faced early in our walks of obedience to Jesus in relation to our sexuality. I wrongly thought that if I lived faithfully to Jesus, He would deliver me of same-sex attractions, He would give me heterosexual desires, send me a husband. I thought that He would make me straight. And when that didn't happen, I had to reckon with myself. Was I being obedient because it suited me and I thought that I could get what I wanted, or because He was worthy of obedience? When God didn't meet my expectations, would I go back to doing things my own way or choose to follow a long obedience in the same direction? It was in that moment that I experienced His supernatural peace and rest. Instead of fighting with God and with myself, experiencing near constant turmoil because I wasn't getting what I wanted out of the deal, I rested in Christ. I embraced His promise that He loves me, approves of me, and withholds no good thing from those He calls His own.
And if you stuck around this long, don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel. That really helps with the views and getting this message out there. So, in this homily, as it's called, Bekah Mason uses the term mixed orientation marriage. Now, that's a term we need to instinctually reject. First of all, we should reject the ideology that there's any such thing as sexual orientation. It's not a real thing. That is a Freudian ideology. That's where it comes from. And it's not compatible with the Bible. And then she largely makes a suggestion that gay Christians are in some way superior to married Christians because the church places marriage on a pedestal of idolatry. And I disagree with that characterization of the church. I'm going to defend the church right now because, the church is an institution. Marriage is an institution. The church has and should have great respect for the institution of marriage. It was one of the first institutions that the Bible ever created, was marriage between man and woman, between Adam and Eve. And this is a beautiful institution. It's meant to represent, in some ways, the God's or Jesus's relationship with the church, how He would die for the church, how He would sacrifice for the church, and how the church would submit to Christ as Christ submits to the Father. It's meant to create on earth, create within mankind a harmony that is experienced in the Holy Trinity. We're supposed to be harmonious in our marriages as the Holy Trinity is harmonious. And, there's just a lot of reasons for marriage. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And she is trashing marriage. She's trashing marriage. There's no other way to put it. Now, in the second part of the clip, it doesn't sound like there's real repentance going on there. It just seems like she, thought about it for a while, considered herself a Christian like many who grew up in the church, and then didn't get what she wanted, so she gave up on that. And she found peace with that in the same way that all these people who deconstruct their faith find peace. It's the same kind of thing. And, and I just gotta be blunt about this. Usually people who grow up in a conservative Christian tradition and then leave that conservative Christian tradition to pursue a liberal or apostate tradition aren't saved. We just gotta be blunt about that. And that's certainly what she's done. And then she's trying to make the conservative faith traditions liberal. So that's her mission in life. And it's wrong. It's a sinful and wicked mission. So this is a clear example. Bekah Mason specifically is a clear example of how this ideology, this Revoice ideology to promote homosexuality in the church, will expand, I think, into the Southern Baptist Convention for sure, because Ed Litton's already weak on this issue. And you're probably going to have him for 2 years because I think everyone's going to forget about plagiarism in a year from now. So, with that said, we have Bekah Mason here who's buddy-buddy with Karen Swallow Prior. They're in the woke feminist club together. And Karen Swallow Prior has already undermined Christian institutions like the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. She was definitely one of the voices behind that downgrade. Like Liberty University, if they've gone downhill even more. I'm not quite caught up on their story, but certainly Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, her hiring there is certainly a downgrade on that organization, which was already one of the most woke organizations in the Southern Baptist Convention. With that said, Bekah Mason and her Southern Baptist credentials with her Southern Baptist connections makes her poised to spread Revoice into the Southern Baptist Convention. And Revoice is not just bent on being Presbyterian friendly, it is bent on taking out everyone. The Revoice movement and this push for homosexuality in the church is just one prong of the social justice gospel. Another prong is critical race theory, and we've talked a lot about critical race theory. We talked a lot about that. A lot of people are talking about critical race theory, and I'm very glad that people are waking up to critical race theory. It is worth noting that I think this is the fight after critical race theory is this Revoice stuff. So we need to actually hammer out our rebuttals. We need to speak up. We need to mark these people who are going to bring this evil ideology into the church, just like we needed to mark the people that were bringing critical race theory into the church. And I think right now the battle lines are being drawn on the issue of critical race theory, but the battle lines are not yet drawn across the board on the Revoice movement. And we need to reject both of them because they're both prongs in the social justice gospel. The other prong that I've not mentioned is egalitarianism. We need to reject that as well because egalitarianism always leads to the other two. It always does. The Evangelical Covenant Church is one example. The United Methodist is another. Just think of any mainline Protestant denomination or, apostate Protestant denomination is a better way to put it. Egalitarian one day, pro-homosexuality the next, pro-woke the next, all that stuff. So we need to reject this whole cloth. And, I'm just raising the alarm about this issue. That's all I got to say about that. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel, like I said, and also like the video. Let me know what you think about what I think. And if you really love the evangelical dark web and want to support this research and want to support this mission, you can go to evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. That'll be linked in the description below, as will the article that this video is a companion to will be linked in the description below. That'll have sources. And back to what I was saying about the evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. You can become a member of the evangelical dark web and support in that way if your heart desires, if you really want to show me some love here. And have a blessed day, and I will catch you on the next one.